First part we derive the IS relation, which actually turned out to be, if we just write it over here. So this just turned out to be, when you derive the IS relation, is I is equal to 0.55 minus 0.351. Right, so in the first part, we derive the IS relation. Now the second part is saying the central bank sets an interest rate of 5%. How is that decision represented by the equations? We can see it's given by this I bar is, given by this I bar is 0.05, right? So basically part B is saying, here we know the central bank is following a fixed interest rate policy rather than fixed money supply policy. So that's an interest rate of 5%. How is this represented by the equation? It's this equation that gives us, right? So I is equal to I bar is equal to 5% indicates the central bank has set I 5% and will adjust the money supply and will adjust money supply to ensure this I is consistent with equilibrium in the financial market. To ensure this I is consistent with equilibrium in financial market, financial market players at this I, right? I.e. financial, because see, if it doesn't, then there'd be pressure on it to change, right? I.e. financial market players, and this will see later paths when you look at monetary expansion, fiscal expansion players at this I. Otherwise, market forces will try to change. Basically, what we're saying over here is that the central bank, in this case, follows a fixed interest rate policy, which chooses the interest rate and keeps it constant at the chosen level. And how does it do that? It does that by adjusting the money supply to maintain financial market equilibrium at this target interest rate. Because if the financial market equilibrium does not clear the central bank's chosen target interest rate, there will be pressure on it to change. Because we know there's excess money demand at this target interest rate, there will be pressure on it to increase. If there's excess money supply, there will be pressure on it to fall. Right? So what the central bank does is when it chooses the interest rate, then it maintains it by basically adjusting money supply to ensure that the financial market clears at this target interest rate, so there's no pressure on it. So it ensures this interest rate is consistent with equilibrium in the financial market by adjusting the supply, right? So you can't just set an interest rate and just sit back. You need to ensure that you're adjusting the money supply to ensure the financial market always clears at this interest rate. So as part, part C asks us to solve for equilibrium output. Let's do that, or let's do the next page. So we want to solve for equilibrium y. Now, for equilibrium, so we want to solve for both equilibrium y and equilibrium y. So for equilibrium y star. Now, equilibrium y, we know occurs where is an intercept. Right, we know equilibrium y in this model occurs y is an intersect. Is equal to LM. Right, so we know equilibrium occurs where IS and LM intersect. So equilibrium y is going to occur where IS and LM intersect. IS is equal to LM, right? It's at the intersection of IS and LM. It's financial market. We know IS equation if we found in part 1 is I is 0.55 minus 0.0055, and we know the LM equation is just simply I is 0.05 because the central bank is following the fixed interest rate policy. So since equilibrium y occurs at the intersection, so setting the two equal, so we get 0.55 minus 0.005y is equal to 0.05. And from here we can solve for y star is 1000. So this is equilibrium y simply at the intersection of I and LM. What about equilibrium y? Right. So equilibrium I in this model, if we had an upward sloping LM curve, then in this case we would have had to plug in the value y in either I or LM. We should find equilibrium I. But equilibrium I in this model is simply given by the horizontal LM curve. So it means it down by the horizontal LM curve. Because if we graphically look at it, Again, the case because the LM curve is fixed. Right? If you look at this is I, this is Y, this is our IS, and this is our LM. So we can see equilibrium occurs at the intersection. So this is equilibrium, and this was our equilibrium Y, which we found by setting I's LM equation equal. And you can see equilibrium I is simply given by a horizontal LM curve, right? So whatever interest rate LM curve, so it's pinned down by the horizontal LM curve. So this means that equilibrium I is just I star is 12%. Right, so equilibrium I is just simply pinned down by a horizontal LM curve in this case. Equilibrium I is what the central bank sets in this particular model. Equilibrium I is what central bank sets because you have a horizontal LM. It's following a fixed interest rate policy. Because the central bank will always maintain the interest rate that it wants to choose by adjusting the money supply. Right, so equilibrium I. Right, so equilibrium Y we can just simply find by setting I's and LM equations equal to each other, and equilibrium I is simply given by the horizontal LM curve. So we're done with this part also. Now part 2 says to find equilibrium values of C and I. So let's do that part C. So now let's start with for equilibrium C. Right, so we know. Now we know C is 150 plus 0.25y. We simplify this from part A. Guys, this is something that we simplified from part A. In part A, when we were driving the ISCO, we simplified the equation for C, where we plugged in the value of T, and instead of as a function of disposable income, we wrote it as a function of Y. So we know C is equal to this much. So equilibrium C, when C is 150 plus 0.25, so equilibrium value C would be when you plug in the equilibrium value Y. So this will just be 150 plus 0.25, and you found equilibrium Y is 1000. So this just turns out to be 400. Alternatively, we could have used, so this is alternative. We could have used C is equal to 200 plus 0.25 YT given question. So this, though we used the simplified form of C as a function of Y from part A. Alternatively, we could have used C is equal to 200 plus 0.5 YT given in part A. So we could have alternatively used that. How would we use that? Let's see, given in part. Right, so we know, okay, we know C is 200 plus 0.25 y minus, and we know that T in this case is 200. So T is 200. So this is y minus 200. Right, this is just YT. So C star would just be 200 plus 0.25 y star minus 200. So then this will just be 200 plus 0.25, and then y star is 1000 minus 200. This would give you the exact same answer. Right? So when you want to find equilibrium values, you can either use the simplified form that we found in part A, when we would see as a function of y. These are essentially disposable income. We just plugged in y minus t, we plugged in the value of t, and then we just simplified this. So we could have used the simplified form of C that we found in part A. Or what we could have done is we could have just simply directly used the form of C given as a function of YT and use that. It doesn't matter. When you want to find equilibrium C, you could have either used the simplified form we found as C as a function of Y and use that to find equilibrium value C, or you could have just used the form given in the question where C is given as a function of YT. Either way, you get the exact same answer, because this that we've used here is just this that we've used here is just a simplification of this, right? So either way, it's fine. Now this is equilibrium value C. Now let's do equilibrium value 5. So now for equilibrium I star. So now we know in the question I is given to us as, in the question this is already in the simplified form, 150 plus 0.25 by minus 1000 I. So it's 150 plus 0.25 y minus 1000 I given. We know I is this is given. So equilibrium value 5 would be when you plug in equilibrium value of I and I. So 150 plus 0.5 y star minus 1000. So we know in the question that this is the value y. So the equilibrium y will correspond to equilibrium values of y and I. So this is 150 plus 0.25. Y star is 1000 and I star is 0.05 is 350. So we can find equilibrium value. So the last part you want to look at for now asks us to go back to the money market. So let's look at the let's start monthly. Let's go behind the scenes in the money market. Chapter 4 introduces equations that describe equilibrium in the money market. So we use equilibrium in the money market. Our real supply of money, which is N by P, is equal to real money demand, which is 2 by minus 8,000. To solve for equilibrium, level of real money supply when I is equal to I1. Like we discussed over here, whenever the central bank in this case, follows this fixed interest rate policy. It sets the interest rate and adjusts the money supply to ensure that it's maintaining financial market equilibrium and its target interest rate. So you want to find the equilibrium value of real money supply. Part D. So now we know in equilibrium that equilibrium value Y is 1000. This we just found in part C1. R star is I star in this case we're writing. I star is 5%. From C. From part C1, we found equilibrium value Y and equilibrium value of interest rate. So we know in equilibrium, what is real money demand? We know real money demand is 2y minus 8,000. So in equilibrium, this is 2y star minus 8,000 I star because equilibrium value. So money demand is 2y minus 8,000. So if I plug in equilibrium value Y and equilibrium value phi, I'll get the equilibrium value of real money. So this is going to be 1,000 minus 8,000, 0.05. This is 1,600. And we know in equilibrium, real money demand is equal to real money supply. So MD by P is equal to MS by P, which is what we're interested in is 1,600. So equilibrium value of real money supply is 1,600 because financial market is in equilibrium. At intersection of ISC. Right. So we know in equilibrium, pi star is 1000, I star is 5%. You can find the equilibrium value of real money. And in the ISLA model, when looking at equilibrium, both goods and financial market are in equilibrium. Since financial market is in equilibrium, so in equilibrium, the real money demand is equal to real money. Right? So we first found the equilibrium value of real money demand, and we know because this is equilibrium, so this means both good and financial market will be in equilibrium, and financial market being in equilibrium means the equilibrium value of real money supply is just equal to the equilibrium value of real.